welcome to another episode of
Midweek with the Mills.
And on this episode, we're going to be looking at an upcoming lesson that we're going to have both in the youth and the kids area. So the youth area, we're going to be looking at the crucifixion of Jesus as specifically out of the account from Mark.
Yes. In preschool and elementary, we're looking more in Matthew and John and the things that they highlight. And
so one of the I guess the things that I find really interesting, and one of the things I'm actually really excited about is as we read this, the youth version, they ask questions a little differently. And so I want to just kind of walk you through what that might look like for a student as they sit in the Sunday school class, and why I just get so excited about this. Like, it's just so good. So let me just read you a little bit from Mark. So Mark chapter 15, we're going to kind of specifically look at Barabbas. I'm gotta work on my speaking, don't I? And that's
just
okay.
On video.
It's just on video, and that's okay. So here we are. Mark chapter 15, verse 7 is where we'll start. There was one named Barabbas, who was a prisoner with rebels who had committed murder during the rebellion. The crowd came up and began to ask Pilate to do for them as was his custom. And Pilate answered them, "Do you want me to release the king of the Jews for you?" For he knew it was because of envy that the chief priests had handed him over. But the chief priests stirred up the crowd so that he would release Barabbas to them instead. And Pilate asked them again, "Then what do you want me to do with this one you call the king of the Jews?" And again they shouted, "Crucify him." And Pilate said to them, "Why? What has he done wrong?" But they shouted all the more, "Crucify him." Wanting to satisfy the crowd, Pilate released Barabbas to them. And after having Jesus flogged, he handed him over to be crucified. So this is something we've probably heard if you've grown up in the church tens of hundreds of times. It's just hard to know. Like, it's just
at least every year at Easter.
At least once a year, if not multiple times. This is just foundational. We really think about Jesus through this passage. We're looking at the trauma that Jesus was placed on his shoulders. That we tend to talk about that flogging and the brutality of the punishment that Jesus bore. But this week we have a kind of a unique question, I thought. So we'll talk a little bit about Jesus being sentenced to death. That the religious leaders, the Sanhedrin, had done that. And then we're going to look at actually Barabbas to start out with. So it's just the first question. We work through more than just this, but the first question, as you think about the criminal Barabbas, is there an illustration for our own lives? And we'll ask the kids, the youth, this question. How do you think Barabbas responded to this turn of events in his favor? Thinking about how Barabbas was released. He was guilty. He had led rebels. Like he was guilty and deserved death. He's the one that deserved death on the cross. Now we don't know how Barabbas responded. That at least Mark doesn't say anything about Barabbas because he's not the center focus of the story, right? But just take a minute and we just think about how do you think Barabbas responded to this turn of events in his favor? And on Sunday school, we'll just have the kids write down in their books just a response to that question. That way they're not all like, "Oh, I think this," in a large group setting, which is hard for them. We just go ahead and have them write that down so they can kind of think about that and process that themselves. Do you have any thoughts on that question? Not to put you on the spot or anything.
Well, I think it would be quite interesting to have been there and to see that, because someone falsely accused would be extremely grateful and extremely thankful. But we don't know. Did he respond by going right back to his life of crime? Did he
start another rebellion?
Yeah, I mean, we don't know. Was he thankful that he was able to be released?
Did he become a follower of Jesus?
Did he become a follower?
After seeing that act of grace on his life?
Yeah.
Because that grace wasn't coming from Jesus, right? That grace was coming from Pilate.
Right.
That release from prison. It just happened to be that Jesus was bearing the brunt of his sins. And And I just think it would have been really interesting to be Barabbas that the day of, the day after, the week after, and the month after. Like, I would have to think that you would sit there and process that and go, whoa, that could have been me. That man took the pain for me. And then the next question that follows that up is, it really is asking a student to insert themselves into the story for a moment and just consider how is it that we should respond to Jesus taking our place. And I think that's a powerful question. And I'm super excited to get to ask students that this week because it's a very gospel-centered question.
Yes.
And so as we talk about the Gospel Project and how do we tie things back to Christ, and that everything kind of leads back to our need for a Savior and obviously Jesus. Man, to insert ourselves into that story and say, I too deserved, I too am rebellious, I too have earned punishment for my sin, but yet Jesus willingly took it on himself. And so I'm super excited. And so this week, if you see this before Sunday rolls around, be praying for our kids, be praying for our students, because that's one of those things that is just powerful in the lives of students. Ponder this as a family. Think about this. It's okay if you ask this question before they come to Sunday school and you're just like, you kind of one-up me a little bit. That's okay. You can look at their eyes and see how they respond to this type of question. Insert yourself into the story and go, what is it that I deserved? And consider that.
Yeah. And in the younger ages, in all of these ages, we are looking at this last week of Christ's life in segments, week by week. And so we're not getting to the end of the story this week. Like, this is a sad stopping point.
Right.
Jesus is dead and buried. The resurrection has not happened yet in this week of our Sunday school. And so we will touch on that a little bit in preschool because we are dealing with preschoolers, and it's important that they don't feel hopeless. Even last week when the story basically ended when Peter denied Jesus in the preschool, and we talked about how that would feel if your family member or a cousin or a friend said, no, I don't know you, and you thought you were a good friend. That would hurt. Even our preschoolers, we could talk about that.
Yeah.
But we said, but wait, just wait.
Yeah.
And we will have to say that again this week. So if your child is sensitive to that, I know all of the teachers will be sensitive to that as well.
Right.
But
we have
just,
good teachers that are amazing.
Be prepared that we have not gotten to the end of the story. Resurrection Sunday is coming in the Gospel Project next week.
Right.
But this week we get to sit in that heaviness and put ourselves in there.
Yeah.
And what is it like? What would we experience?
There's also a measure of thankfulness that I think that even in the midst of the heaviness of this weight, that if we're like Barabbas, to some measure we should be thankful. And this time of year is a great time to be thinking about being thankful, right? As we're rolling up on Thanksgiving. We've already got advertisements for Christmas. As we're thinking about the birth of Christ, and there's a lot to be thankful for this time of year. And so, what are some ways that we could be just to kind of spark a few ideas of how we can show or demonstrate or experience thankfulness in our families?
Well, it can be as simple as just around the table before you eat, ask some of your kids or all of your kids to just name something they're thankful for that day. In years past, we had a sliding door at our old house near our table, and we put basically a paper tree up, and we would write every day, the kids and I, we would write things we were thankful for on little fall colored leaves, and it was great. Our kids were really little, and so most of the leaves ended up towards the bottom, so it looked like a fall tree. Short little people. But that was a great visual reminder, and anything intentional One of our kids today, we were talking about ways to be intentional. One talked about baking cookies and taking them to someone who has been helpful or who maybe needs, maybe is struggling and needs to be encouraged.
Yeah, it seems like there's lots of people that, even if they're not financially struggling, they're just a lot of emotional struggles right now. There's been a lot going on in society with health scares and just being in the midst of a global pandemic. There's a weight with people. And so this is also just a great exercise to say, at the end of the day, I'm thankful for, and it might be just little simple things like the sun shining today. Yes. I saw some posts today on Facebook about how beautiful the frost was. You can either complain about the frost and having to scrape it off your car, or you can look at a bush or a flower or the grass and go, wow, that is amazing. And so just some little ways that we talk about, I am thankful for, really help to encourage people, can help encourage families, help encourage one another. And so just want to encourage you that, guys, this week, one more time. We're just really excited about what we're doing in the Gospel Project. There may be a day that we get to the end of talking about this every single week, but for now, this is what we're going to talk about, and we've got kind of some exciting things coming up that we'll tell you about in the upcoming weeks. So just stay tuned. Thanks for joining us today.